The rain in Seattle was still drizzling when Helen White vanished on the evening of November 14, 2009. That autumn night was cold and damp, with mist blanketing the streets around Capitol Hill. At 8:52 p.m., the security camera captured the 19-year-old freshman leaving the train station, backpack slung over her shoulder, holding a black umbrella. Her final text to her mother was brief. "I'm coming home now." A passerby recalled seeing a young woman walking along the edge of Green Lake, her petite figure standing out in the hazy rain. What happened in the less than 1 hour that followed would haunt Seattle for over a decade. Before diving into the story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell to stay updated on the latest cases. On November 14, 2009, Seattle was cloaked in a thick curtain of drizzle, its streets slick under the glow of streetlights reflecting in endless golden streaks. The city was accustomed to this wet weather, but that night, the air felt heavier, colder, as if foreshadowing something unusual. At the University of Washington campus, evening classes had just ended, and students hurried home, some with umbrellas, others with hoods, weaving through the light rain. Among them was Helen White, 19, a freshman with long brown hair and a gentle demeanor. Helen left the lecture hall as the clock neared 8:30 p.m., carrying a heavy backpack full of books and holding a small black umbrella to shield herself from the cold rain. She headed toward the Capitol Hill station, where the harsh white glow of fluorescent lights illuminated the rain-streaked pavement. The station's security camera captured a blurry image of her stepping out, her slim figure clutching the backpack strap with her left hand, umbrella in her right, walking slightly faster than usual, as if eager to get home and escape the intensifying rain. That image, though unclear, would later become crucial evidence, the last moment Helen was seen by anyone. As she reached street level, Helen pulled out her phone and sent a short text to her mother. "I'm coming home now." Just 3 simple words, so ordinary that no one could have imagined they'd be her last. At their small apartment in North Seattle, her mother read the text, feeling some relief, expecting her daughter to knock on the door in a matter of minutes, wet from the rain but safe. Yet, as time passed by 9 p.m., Helen still hadn't returned. Her mother began calling her phone, met with silence, then a direct transfer to voicemail. She called repeatedly, but the result was the same oppressive silence. Helen's phone had gone offline, no longer picking up signals from nearby cell towers. Worry turned to fear, and in the small apartment, Helen's mother paced back and forth, eyes glued to the wall clock, heart pounding. Helen's younger brother asked frantic questions, but no one had answers. Outside, the rain continued to patter on the tin roof, adding to the heavy atmosphere. When the clock struck 10 o'clock, the unease reached its peak. The family could no longer wait. Trembling, Helen's mother dialed the Seattle Police Department, reporting that her daughter was missing. From that moment, the case officially began, marking the fateful night when Helen White disappeared from the city, leaving behind an unfillable void. When the White family's call was received, the Seattle Police Department immediately dispatched a patrol unit to their apartment to gather information. In the initial minutes, the case was logged as a missing adult, a common classification rarely treated as urgent. However, the urgency in the mother's voice, combined with the fact that Helen's phone had abruptly gone silent over an hour earlier, prevented the night shift from dismissing it lightly. A missing person report was officially filed, marking the start of an investigation that would span years. The first detectives to meet with the family quickly noted that Helen had no history of running away, no major conflicts with family or friends, and no signs of depression. Her mother described her as a diligent student who loved reading, enjoyed indie music, and typically came straight home after classes. When police contacted Helen's classmates, their statements were consistent that evening. She left class as usual, seemed cheerful, and showed no signs of distress. No one heard her mention plans to leave or any trouble with anyone. This quickly ruled out the theory of voluntary disappearance, a possibility police often consider early in adult missing person cases. After reconstructing Helen's activities on November 14th, police mapped out her usual route home from the Capitol Hill station, a long stretch northward, circling Green Lake Park, before turning into the residential area where she lived. That route was quiet at night, especially on cold, rainy late autumn evenings. The investigative team began reviewing traffic cameras along the route. But in 2009, Seattle's camera system was not as extensive as today, and most footage was blurry and hard to decipher. Still, a camera near the Capitol Hill station exit captured Helen leaving, matching the time her family received her final text. This became the first timestamp on the case's timeline. Witnesses also began to emerge. A woman living in an apartment near Green Lake reported seeing a young woman in a dark coat, holding an umbrella, walking along the lake around 8:45 p.m., her description closely matching Helen. However, another witness, a man, claimed he saw a young woman standing next to a silver-gray sedan near the Aurora Avenue bus stop around the same time, appearing hesitant before approaching the car's door. Both accounts aligned in timing, but conflicted in behavior, creating a knot that made it difficult for police to determine which was accurate. The investigative team constructed a detailed timeline. 7:50 p.m. Helen left class. 8:15 p.m. Appeared at Capitol Hill Station. Sent text to her mother. 8:45 p.m. Possibly walked by Green Lake Park, or stopped near a strange car. 9 p.m. Phone lost signal. The final half hour became a dangerous blind spot, where something happened that caused Helen to vanish completely. In the days that followed, detectives canvassed neighborhoods around Green Lake, seeking additional witnesses. They knocked on doors and questioned residents, but most only vaguely recalled seeing a young woman walking in the rain, with no certainty. A few teens near the Aurora bus stop mentioned hearing a loud car engine revving before it disappeared into the night, but they couldn't provide a license plate or clear description. Police also contacted the phone company to retrieve the last ping data from Helen's phone. The signal showed the phone was abruptly turned off in the Green Lake area between 7:45 and 8 p.m., then ceased functioning. Combined with witness accounts and camera footage, the window from 8:45 to 9 p.m. became the focal point of the investigation. Every detail, no matter how small, was noted on a large timeline board at the Seattle PD office, with red threads connecting time points and blank spaces circled like growing question marks. The air in the investigation room was thick with urgency and tension, as detectives knew every passing hour could determine Helen White's survival. On the morning of the third day after Helen's disappearance, Seattle remained cloaked in damp air. The rain had eased, but the gray sky made Green Lake even more somber. Around 6 a.m., a middle-aged man who regularly jogged around the lake noticed a backpack discarded near the grass, just a few meters from the path. At first, he thought it was simply forgotten, but the chaotic way it was tossed, straps muddy, zipper partially open, made him uneasy. Upon closer inspection, he noticed a University of Washington sticker still attached, instantly recalling the news of a 19-year-old student named Helen White, who went missing in the area. He immediately called 911. Within minutes, police arrived and cordoned off the scene. Detectives, wearing gloves, photographed the area before touching the backpack. Inside, they found books, notebooks, and a few pens, all matching the family's description. But the black leather wallet was empty, with all cash and student ID gone. Helen's phone was there, but what sent chills through everyone was that the SIM card had been removed, and the battery was loosely placed beside it, as if someone had deliberately sabotaged its ability to function. The most shocking detail was tiny specks of blood on the outermost zipper, spreading into a faint, dark stain barely noticeable in the dim light. A forensic technician swabbed the sample, sealing it carefully. A long brown hair was also found caught in a side pocket, but it didn't match Helen's jet black hair. Immediately, the theory of a second person's presence emerged in the detectives' minds. The entire backpack was sealed, placed in an evidence bag, and sent straight to the Seattle PD lab for DNA and trace analysis. The jogger testified that he hadn't seen the backpack the previous day, suggesting it had been placed there within the last 24 hours, or the perpetrator returned to the scene to dispose of partial evidence, hoping to mislead police. In front of the media, the police spokesperson only confirmed that a personal item had been recovered, refusing to share details. But in the investigation room, detectives debated intensely. The backpack's location near Green Lake aligned with one witness's account of seeing Helen walking by the lake. If this was indeed her belonging, it added a new point to the timeline. Helen had been at the lake at least between 8:45 and 9 p.m. on November 14. Technicians scanned the backpack for fingerprints, finding a few faint, unclear ones. Preliminary analysis suggested the blood could be human, but further testing was needed to confirm. The brown hair became a focal point, as it could belong to the perpetrator or someone involved. In the following days, police scoured the Green Lake area again, this time far more thoroughly. Divers were deployed to search the lake's depths, and forensic teams used metal detectors in the mud. They hoped to find the phone, wallet, or a potential weapon, but came up empty. The backpack seemed to be the only remaining piece. Meanwhile, the team analyzing Helen's phone examined the disabled device. Though inoperative, they could still access message history, calls, and apps. Nothing unusual was found except the final "I'm coming home now" text to her mother. Notably, there were no calls or messages after 8:15 p.m. When the camera recorded Helen leaving the station, this suggested the phone was forcibly disabled early, possibly by someone else. The team reviewed the timeline. 8:15 p.m. left the station, 8:45 p.m. seen near the lake. Simultaneous witness report of her standing by a gray car, after 9 p.m. phone silent. By November 17, the backpack emerged with blood and a strange hair. Each piece shifted the case toward a criminal scenario rather than a simple disappearance. Thick reports were rushed to the lab. Police knew that only when DNA and hair analysis results came back could they expand the investigation to identify who was with Helen in her final moments before she vanished. The atmosphere at Seattle PD grew heavy and tense, but all agreed the case had officially escalated from a missing person search to a criminal investigation. Immediately after Helen's backpack was found and sealed, the Seattle PD launched the city's largest search operation ever for a missing person case. Early on November 18, 2009, the area around Green Lake became a makeshift command center. Police cars, fire trucks, hastily erected tents, and yellow tape blocking off paths. Morning joggers were rerouted as the lake was completely sealed off. Over 20 divers from the rescue team were deployed, equipped with oxygen tanks, dive lights, and sonar scanners to search the vast lake. The water was murky with fog, and divers submerged, bubbles rising to the surface, but hour after hour, day after day, they surfaced with only heavy shakes of their heads. Beneath the lake, aside from a few rusty soda cans and old bicycles, there was no trace of Helen. Simultaneously, canine units were unleashed around the park. 6 German shepherds and bloodhounds, trained specifically to locate missing persons, sniffed through bushes and grass. At one point, a dog barked loudly near the lake's west shore, drawing the entire team, but it turned out to be a false alarm, merely the scent of discarded clothing. Effort after effort, hope began to fade into frustration. Beyond official forces, hundreds of city volunteers flocked to Green Lake. They brought flashlights and reflective vests, splitting into small groups to comb park trails, knock on doors in the surrounding area, and distribute flyers with Helen's photo and bold text. Missing since 11/14. Contact Seattle PD if seen. Some University of Washington students, Helen's classmates, created a social media group to rally support, posting her picture and updates constantly. For that week, the entire city seemed to move to a single rhythm, a relentless search. Police reconstructed the timeline, cross-referencing witness statements. Some insisted they saw Helen walking alone on a lake trail, while others swore she was standing by a silver gray car parked on the roadside. The investigative team left no detail unchecked. Every gray car in the area was reviewed, but nothing concrete emerged. Each lead opened a path, only to close in silence. Security camera footage from around the park was collected, but the heavy rain blurred the images, leaving only vague figures moving under streetlights. For 7 days, Green Lake Park became a labyrinth of despair. Small rubber boats patrolled the shoreline. Searchers scoured every square meter of grass in organized lines. But all returned empty-handed. Local media published constant updates, with Helen's image on the front page of the Seattle Times and regional TV channels. Public pressure mounted, demanding answers, but police could only shake their heads. Each evening, as the search team returned to the temporary headquarters, the mood grew heavy. Mud-streaked faces and vacant stares of volunteers and investigators alike reflected exhaustion and helplessness. Helen's family was often present. Her mother sat silently under a tree near the command post, eyes red, gazing at the lake as if waiting for a miracle. But no miracle came. By the seventh day, the entire area had been searched 3 times on land, underwater, and in every nook. No further traces were found beyond the backpack. Seattle PD faced a harsh reality. This was no longer a simple accident. The backpack, blood, strange hair, and Helen's complete disappearance pointed to a darker, more sinister scenario. Yet, at the time, they lacked enough evidence to confirm it, and official reports to the public maintained that the search continued. Internally, detectives' fears grew. Helen White was no longer nearby. This realization shifted the investigation. Instead of focusing solely on Green Lake, police expanded, chasing every minor clue. From here, they entered a precarious phase, where conflicting reports and inconsistent witness accounts repeatedly led the team down wrong paths. On November 24th, a week after the fruitless search, an urgent call came to the hotline. A woman in Tacoma claimed she saw a girl resembling Helen at a gas station on Pacific Avenue, accompanied by a middle-aged man, appearing distressed and possibly seeking help. The news sent the team rushing to Tacoma, coordinating with local police to review the station's security footage. But after hours of scrutiny, the footage revealed the girl was just a local student who looked similar to Helen. The witness's well-intentioned tip became another dead end, wasting dozens of hours and precious resources. Soon after, another lead emerged. A silver-gray sedan was reported lingering near Green Lake the night Helen vanished, matching the earlier witness account of her standing by a gray car. Hope surged, and police launched a search, reviewing hundreds of vehicle registrations, compiling owner lists, and interviewing dozens of people. After nearly 10 days, the results disappointed. The suspicious car belonged to a local resident who used it to drive his son to basketball practice that evening. No connection to Helen. Once again, a promising lead ended in a dead end. As police grappled with dead ends, the media began stirring public sentiment. Some tabloids suggested Helen had run away, citing her status as a student away from home, possibly under academic or family stress. Sensational headlines like "Seattle Girl Vanishes," "Runaway or Abduction" flooded newspapers and local TV. Helen's family was outraged, insisting she had no reason to disappear. She loved studying at the University of Washington, called her mother regularly, and had never run away before. But the rumors sowed doubt in the community, and during police press conferences, reporters relentlessly questioned the possibility of Helen choosing to leave her life behind. This not only pained the family, but also diverted the investigation's focus. Over the next month, the Helen White case file grew by hundreds of pages, mostly reports of false leads. Some claimed to have seen her in Portland. Others sent photos of a girl on a bus in Spokane. Each time, police sent officers to verify, and each time the answer was the same: not Helen. These trips drained time, money, and the team's morale. A veteran detective later recalled, "We spent over half our time ruling out irrelevant things. It pulled us further from the case's true essence." By early December 2009, all initial investigative paths had hit dead ends. No clear suspects, no new evidence beyond the backpack, no reliable witnesses. The Helen White case risked being labeled a cold case without a breakthrough. Her family remained steadfast, posting her photos around the neighborhood, praying for a miracle. But in the Seattle PD's investigation room, a sense of stagnation loomed. Amidst a mountain of false leads and rumors, the true perpetrator remained invisible. Yet, While detectives lacked answers, the forensic lab quietly pursued every tiny clue. The blood samples from the backpack's zipper and the long brown hair were sent for analysis in the first week after the backpack's discovery, but it wasn't until late December that results returned to the command desk. The report revealed a male DNA profile extracted from the blood on the zipper, the first sign that a man had directly interacted with Helen's backpack that night. Excitement quickly turned to disappointment. When the DNA was run through CODIS, the national database, no matches were found. It didn't belong to anyone with a prior conviction or record in the system. Police held an emergency meeting, with investigators admitting their high hopes had been dashed. A long silence enveloped the room. The lead detective finally said curtly, "Keep it. Someday technology will catch up." The decision sounded cold, but was the only truth at the time. The DNA was resealed, stored in the evidence locker with a note. "Unidentified requires future analysis." For Seattle police in 2009, it was like a key that couldn't open any door, valuable but unusable. Around the same time, forensic technicians noted another suspicious detail. Inside the backpack's lining, they found a tiny bone fragment, less than a centimeter long. Initially, some thought it was debris from books or pens, but the lab confirmed it was human bone. The problem was, no one could determine if it belonged to Helen or someone else. The fragment was too small to extract complete DNA. With 2009 technology, analysts tried multiple methods but failed, ultimately sealing the bone with other evidence for a future when science advanced. As 2010 closed, Seattle PD faced a painful reality. They had no new leads to pursue in Helen White's disappearance. For 12 months, detectives had raced after every witness statement, blurry security footage, and gray car within a 10-mile radius of Green Lake. But all ended in dead ends. The male DNA from the blood, the mysterious bone fragment, and the strange hair in the backpack, items once hoped to unlock the case, became evidence saved for the future. No name, no face emerged. Helen's family kept asking for updates, but police responses grew shorter. Nothing new. Gradually, media coverage faded, Seattle's public began to forget, and the case went cold. Each year, on November 14th, the anniversary of Helen's disappearance, her family and friends held a candlelight vigil by Green Lake. They brought her photo, placing small candles along the water's edge, their flickering flames reflecting on the rippling surface. Some years, over 100 locals attended, others, only a few dozen familiar faces remained. But Helen's mother was always there, clutching her daughter's framed picture, eyes fixed on the lake, as if hoping Helen would emerge from the cold mist. The vigil became a somber ritual, a reminder to the community that the young woman was never found, and the case was never truly closed. Meanwhile, at Seattle PD headquarters, all evidence from the Helen case was transferred to a dedicated cold storage facility. The backpack, phone, clothing, and tiny bone fragment were sealed in labeled bags, carefully cataloged, and placed on a metal shelf alongside hundreds of other cases. Each time, a new forensic testing technology emerged. Technicians would retrieve Helen's DNA samples for comparison, but the results were always the same. No match in CODIS. The case file, updates repeated like a copied script. No match. Evidence preserved. Time marched on. In 2012, Helen's family once again urged police to expand the investigation, requesting another sweep of Green Lake, but Seattle PD had exhausted its budget and manpower for a case with no progress. During a closed meeting, a detective bluntly stated, "We've done all we can. If the perpetrator hasn't surfaced, only future science can help." Those words were recorded in the minutes, all but officially confirming that Helen's case was slipping into oblivion. By 2015, after 6 years without a breakthrough, Seattle PD officially classified Helen White's disappearance as a cold case. Her name was printed in a thick file, stacked alongside countless others, people who vanished or were murdered without resolution. For the police, it was administrative procedure, placing a stagnant case on a long list for a day when new technology or information might revive it. But for Helen's family, it felt like a life sentence of pain. It meant that, in the system's eyes, their daughter's case had gone cold, a phrase as chilling as it was cruel. From then on, life continued in Seattle, the city cycling through rain and sun as usual. But Helen White's case lived on only in her family's memories and the flickering candles each November. The evidence sat silently in cold storage, as if waiting for a day when science could awaken the truth from its long hibernation. In early 2022, after nearly 13 years on the cold case list, Helen White's name unexpectedly returned to the desks of investigators in the Seattle Cold Case Unit. This unit was established to review cases thought long dead, but thanks to advancements in technology, many old files had a chance to come back to life. A small team of 3 veteran detectives and 2 forensic technicians was assigned to reopen the 2009 disappearance. They began by unsealing dusty evidence boxes containing everything related to Helen, the rain-soaked backpack, still bearing faint bloodstains on the zipper, the cracked screen phone with its SIM card removed, a mud-stained notebook, the long brown hair that didn't match Helen's, and the tiny bone fragment in its own plastic bag. It was as if the past flooded back with each item. But this time, the technology was different. The detectives held a closed meeting right in the evidence storage room. They knew that in 2009, the DNA results had only identified an unknown male profile, unmatched in CODIS. But 2022 was different. Forensic genealogy, genetic ancestry analysis, had cracked hundreds of cold cases across the U.S. Detectives stated plainly, "We have to bring this case into the light. Helen can't just remain a name on a list." After much discussion, they agreed they would send all DNA samples from the backpack, blood, hair, even the bone fragment, to a private lab specializing in forensic genealogy. On March 15, 2022, the sealed bags were retrieved, checked one last time, and packed into a secure transport box. This new approach was risky. The analysis cost tens of thousands of dollars, and the budget was tight. But Seattle PD approved it, knowing that without this effort, the case would remain stagnant forever. In a memo to superiors, the cold case unit commander emphasized, "The key evidence backpack, blood, hair, phone, remains intact. This is our only chance to identify who interacted with Helen the night she vanished." For weeks afterward, the team waited with bated breath. Detectives re-examined old files, reconstructing the timeline of November 14, 2009. Helen left Capitol Hill Station, sent her final text to her mother, and vanished near Green Lake. Blurry camera footage, conflicting witnesses, false leads, all were reviewed as if they had happened yesterday. But all eyes were on the forensic genealogy lab. Only they could answer the biggest question: who did the male DNA on the backpack belong to? As summer 2022 approached, the first preliminary report arrived. For the first time in over a decade, Helen White's case file was no longer silent. The lab reported success in reconstructing a detailed DNA profile for comparison with public genealogical databases. The results didn't name a suspect outright, but mapped out a family tree with hundreds of distant relatives across Washington and Oregon. It was a lid that didn't exist in 2009. When the preliminary report from the Forensic Genealogy Lab reached Seattle PD, the atmosphere in the cold case unit's meeting room crackled after years of stagnation. Geneticists had successfully built a DNA profile detailed enough to use in GEDmatch, an open-source genetic database allowing comparisons with millions of user-submitted profiles. Upon uploading the profile, initial results appeared not a direct match, but several distant matches with 2–3% shared DNA. This meant the DNA from the blood on Helen's backpack was related, potentially as a great-grandparent, distant cousin, or 4th to 6th degree relative, to individuals in GEDmatch. In genealogical circles, this was a golden piece of the puzzle. From a tiny clue, they could trace an entire lineage. The report pinpointed that the most significant matches linked to a large family with deep roots in Oregon, a clan that migrated from the Midwest in the 19th century before branching out to Oregon, Washington, and California. From a few specific names in GED match, genealogists began constructing a family tree spanning 6 generations with hundreds of members. Detectives sat with experts, staring at whiteboards covering the meeting room walls, where each branch was drawn like a spiderweb, marked with colorful sticky notes. Each square was a name, a birth year, a place of residence. The work was meticulous. Each generation expanded into dozens of branches, some veering to other states, some to the south, others to the East Coast. But the genealogists patiently narrowed it down by cross-referencing with case data. Helen vanished in Seattle in 2009, so they focused on family branches living or working in Washington during that period. They eliminated branches solely in California or Texas and crossed out names of those deceased before 2009. From hundreds of names, the list shrank to a few dozen viable individuals. In this process, family stories emerged from public records, birth certificates, marriage licenses, obituaries, even school records and old addresses. Experts built a sprawling genealogical map spanning nearly 2 centuries. The pieces, though distant, gradually converged into a tighter circle. By September 2022, a critical breakthrough emerged in the 5th generation of this Oregon family. Several members were recorded as living in Seattle, King County, in 2009. This was the first turning point, steering the case in a new direction. Police meticulously noted each remaining name in this branch, cross-checking with age suitability. In 2009, the suspect was likely a man aged 25, 40, based on behavioral data and mobility. After filtering, they were left with just over 10 names. Each was printed, pinned to the board, accompanied by ID photos or images from public records. Detectives studied these faces with tension. One of them could be the man who left blood on Helen White's backpack. In the final days of the year, genealogists dug deeper. They requested additional medical records, military files, voter registries, even local news mentions. Every connection was cross-checked multiple times to avoid missteps. The once disjointed family tree became a dense map, with red lines circling the focus area, members living in Seattle and Tacoma between 2005 and 2010. For Seattle police, this was the first time in 13 years they felt they were touching the shadow of the perpetrator. From here, the investigation entered a new phase. From an anonymous DNA profile, they now had an entire family to narrow down, and the next task was to reduce those dozens of names to one: the person who made Helen White vanish in the rainy night of 2009. As the sprawling family tree covering the meeting room walls was significantly narrowed, Seattle PD detectives and genealogists began a rigorous refining phase. From hundreds of names across generations, they eliminated women, minors, and men too old for the profile. Based on behavior, physical capability, and the time of Helen's disappearance, the suspect was likely a man aged 25, 40 in 2009. After multiple rounds of filtering, the list was reduced to exactly 5 names. 5 men, all from the same Oregon family branch that migrated to Seattle, all born between 1978 and 1982. Police printed profiles for each, pinning them to the board. Beneath each photo were preliminary notes: occupation, residence, criminal record, relationships, and 2009 movements. 4 of the 5 seemed relatively clean. One was an accountant living stably with family in Oregon. Another was enlisted, confirmed to be in Afghanistan in 2009. A third was an elementary school teacher in Portland. The 4th was a construction engineer, with travel records showing he was in Spokane when Helen vanished. Only one name made the room fall silent: Daniel Moore. Detectives circled Moore's photo in red, labeling it primary suspect. From there, all discussions revolved around him. They reconstructed Moore's 2009 timeline, an IT contract at a small office in Capitol Hill, frequently passing the train station where Helen was last seen. Credit card records even showed Moore bought fast food at a shop just a few hundred meters from Green Lake Park in October and November of that year. When comparing Moore's timeline to key case points, the coincidences were striking. The team also discovered that Moore left Seattle in 2010, moved to Tacoma briefly, then settled in Ballard. His frequent relocations after 2009 raised suspicions that he might have been covering his tracks. Driving records revealed Moore owned a silver gray sedan, a detail matching the witness account of a car near Helen the night she disappeared. The layers of evidence piled up. What once seemed like random details now formed a chilling picture: a man living minutes from the scene, with a history of violence against women, owning a car matching the witness description, and now linked to the DNA from Helen's backpack. In an internal meeting, the lead investigator spoke bluntly. "We're no longer talking about a hopeless long list, we're looking at a specific man. Daniel Moore was in Seattle, had opportunity, means, and now DNA ties. If it's not him, then who?" The room was silent, only the sound of pens scribbling. Once Daniel Moore's name was pinpointed, Seattle PD knew they were on the cusp of a major breakthrough in Helen White's case. But intuition and records weren't enough. They needed undeniable proof. A current DNA sample from Moore to directly compare with the blood on Helen's 2009 backpack. Only an absolute match would convince a court and close the legal net around the suspect after 13 years of freedom. A covert surveillance plan was meticulously crafted. Moore was placed under 24/7 monitoring, from his Ballard apartment to his small IT job. Undercover officers took shifts tailing him, noting every habit. He left home at 7:30 a.m. He often bought coffee at a regular spot on 15th Avenue, worked late, and returned home alone. Police cataloged every minor routine, knowing that in these mundane moments, Moore would leave biological traces: a cup, a beer can, a piece of trash that could unlock the case. On the first day, an undercover agent sat in Moore's usual coffee shop. He drank a latte quickly, leaving the cup behind. The agent swiftly collected it, sealing it in an evidence bag. But the DNA on the cup was contaminated by cleaning water too impure for analysis. Disappointed but undeterred, a week later, Moore discarded a trash bag from his apartment. The surveillance team waited until he left, then retrieved it, sorting through it in a secure facility. Among the refuse, they found a worn toothbrush and a razor with facial hair. Both were sealed and sent to the forensic lab. While awaiting results, surveillance continued relentlessly. Moore lived alone, kept to himself, and often walked the neighborhood at night, or drank beer at a cheap bar. One weekend evening, he left a bar, abandoning a beer can with saliva on the rim. An officer posing as a busboy grabbed it. Another valuable DNA sample. Police gathered these, preparing for the decisive test. The days awaiting results were the tensest the cold case team had ever faced. Everyone understood this wasn't just a test. It was the only path to pull the case from darkness. Each new email sent the room into a hush. Then, one late December 2022 afternoon, the official report arrived. Bold text stood out on the screen. DNA sample from Daniel Moore matches bloodstain on backpack. Probability of identity exceeds 1 in 1 trillion. In that moment, the room fell silent. Some exhaled, others teared up. After 13 years, the faint bloodstain once dismissed as insufficient data had found its owner. Daniel Moore, the man who lived blocks from Green Lake, owned a silver gray sedan matching witness descriptions, with a prior assault record against women, was no longer just a name in a distant family tree, but the prime suspect. The lead investigator read the conclusion aloud, voice slightly trembling but firm. "We have the man who touched Helen's backpack. DNA doesn't lie. It's time to prepare an arrest warrant." The detectives sat there, after over a decade of staring at a cold file, finally feeling the warmth of justice. A new journey began, from covert surveillance to public action. But none forgot this moment, the day the tiny blood drops on Helen White's backpack finally spoke, pointing directly at Daniel Moore. After the DNA results confirmed Daniel Moore's perfect match with the blood on Helen White's backpack, Seattle PD shifted all investigative efforts to building a comprehensive profile of the suspect. This process, called suspect profiling, aimed to paint a full picture of Moore, from his lifestyle and work to the smallest traces on the internet. First, police reviewed his basic background. Moore, now 44, lived alone in a small rented Ballard apartment. He was unmarried, with no record of a spouse or children. Neighbors described him as the quiety IT guy, rarely interacting, keeping his door shut, only seen leaving to shop or work. One neighbor on his floor noted, "I never saw him have visitors, just heard typing from his apartment every night." This reclusive lifestyle allowed Moore to fly under the radar for years. When detectives dug into employment records, a key detail emerged. In 2009, Moore worked night shifts under a contract for a small IT firm near Capitol Hill, the very area where Helen was last captured on camera. His job placed him around the train station and Helen's usual route. This strongly supported the theory that he crossed paths with her the night she vanished. Going further, Seattle PD's digital forensics team obtained a court order to recover old data from hard drives seized from Moore's apartment. The process took weeks, but the findings sent chills through the team. In 2010 internet search history, Moore had repeatedly looked up Green Lake missing girl and Helen White case. He even visited forums discussing the disappearance, reading community comments. Notably, Moore saved articles about Helen's candlelight vigils and photos of her family at a 2011 prayer event. This behavior revealed an obsession. After committing the crime, Moore continued to follow every development in the case. He didn't flee entirely but stayed close to the scene, even secretly tracking the pain endured by the victim's family. Criminal psychologists noted this as a classic pattern. The perpetrator derives perverse satisfaction from observing the consequences of their actions. Police also traced back to a 2007 incident when Moore was briefly detained for assaulting a woman near a parking lot. The victim's statement recorded that he followed her from a train station to her car, then suddenly shoved her. Her screams caused Moore to flee, and the case was closed due to lack of evidence. Though it left no criminal record, this event was now viewed in a new light. Moore had a history of violent behavior toward women, and Helen may have been the first victim he successfully killed. The suspect profile was stacked with red flags: living near Green Lake, working in Capitol Hill in 2009, owning a gray sedan matching witness descriptions, a prior assault incident, DNA matching the evidence, and an internet history obsessed with the case. All formed a tight, inescapable circle. When the comprehensive report was presented to the King County Prosecutor's Office, the lead investigator concluded with a single sentence: Daniel Moore is no longer a shadow in a family tree. He was the one with Helen in her final moments. With a suspect profile spanning hundreds of pages, the investigation was now ready to move to the decisive phase, obtaining an arrest warrant and bringing Moore to justice. As the suspect profile for Daniel Moore grew to hundreds of pages, Seattle PD knew they had enough to move to the critical phase, securing an arrest warrant. A closed meeting in late January 2023 took place in the Cold Case Units room, with all key investigators present. On the table were numbered case files, photos of Helen White in life, images of the sealed backpack with bloodstains, and crucially, the DNA comparison report with bold text. 100% match. Detectives recounted the entire journey from the initial 2009 evidence, the unmatched DNA sample, to 2022, when forensic genealogy paved the way, constructing a family tree leading to the Moore family in Oregon, then narrowing to Daniel Moore. Additionally, recovered internet history from his hard drive showed multiple searches for Green Lake missing girl, and news related to Helen's case. The King County prosecutor attended, listening and evaluating. He stressed that a 13-year-old cold case required ironclad evidence to convince a judge. Thus, the investigative team prepared a detailed presentation divided into sections. Part 1. DNA from the backpack and Moore's match. Part 2. Genetic genealogy, proving the family connection. Part 3. Geographic location and night shift job near Capitol Hill during Helen's disappearance. Part 4. Abnormal behavior, including the 2007 assault and 2010 internet history. All pieces were woven into a logical, gapless narrative. On February 2, 2023, at King County Courthouse, police and prosecutors formally presented the case to the judge. The small courtroom was thick with tension. The lead investigator began, "Your Honor, this case has haunted the city for 13 years. We believe Daniel Moore is responsible for Helen White's disappearance and death." He presented each piece of evidence: backpack photos, DNA report, six-generation family tree map, recovered internet data. The judge listened intently, asking questions about the DNA testing process and forensic genealogy's reliability. Forensic experts were called, clearly explaining each step from extracting DNA from the 2009 bloodstain to comparing it with public databases, narrowing to a small group, and confirming an absolute match with Moore's trash samples. When the prosecutor presented the internet history showing searches for Green Lake missing girl, the room fell silent. It wasn't just a technical detail, but evidence of Moore's obsession with the case after committing the crime. The judge nodded slowly, taking notes. After hours of presentation, he concluded, "The evidence is sufficient to establish probable cause. There is reasonable basis to proceed with an arrest." The words rang like a bell in the quiet room. That afternoon, the arrest warrant was officially signed, naming Daniel Moore, charged with first-degree murder and concealment of a body. After over a decade, Helen White's case shifted from cold to red-hot. As the warrant was printed, stamped in red, and handed to the investigative team, many exhaled, as if shedding a burden carried for 13 years. A female detective whispered, "Helen is finally about to have her voice heard." Seattle PD immediately began preparing for the apprehension operation. They knew Moore wasn't armed and dangerous, but his psychological instability and erratic temperament made him a potential threat. Thus, the SWAT team was deployed to ensure absolute safety. In the operations manual, a line was triple underlined in bold, "Target Daniel Moore." Timing: early February 2023. Objective: safe arrest. Evidence: seizure. On a freezing morning in early February 2023, the quiet Ballard neighborhood became the scene of a police operation. From dawn, unmarked vehicles silently took positions at intersections around Moore's three-story apartment building. SWAT, fully equipped with body armor, shields, and semi-automatic weapons, quietly deployed. The team leader commanded via radio, "Target, Apartment 2B. Arrest warrant confirmed. Priority, safety." No one on the team allowed for error, knowing this was the culmination of 13 years of patience and thousands of investigative hours. At 6:15 a.m., as the neighborhood was still half asleep, SWAT approached the apartment door. A loud knock echoed, followed by a shout, "Seattle Police, search warrant." No immediate response came from inside. Seconds later, a figure appeared at the window, Moore, disheveled, looking confused. Before he could react, the door was breached with a hydraulic tool. The team rushed in, swiftly restraining him. Moore was pinned to the floor, hands cuffed in seconds. There was no violent resistance, only rapid breathing and a weak mumble. "What's going on?" The small, dim apartment was immediately searched. On the desk, police found an old, dust-covered hard drive, carefully stored in a shock-proof bag. In a drawer, they retrieved a black notebook filled with disjointed scribbles, numbers, strange symbols and phrases like Green Lake and missing girl. The items were sealed at once. Multiple USB drives, old CDs, and loose documents were also collected for later analysis. As Moore was escorted out, neighbors gathered, stunned by the SWAT presence. An elderly woman next door shook her head in disbelief. "I've known him for years. He was just a quiet guy. Always said hello. Never thought he could do something like this." A younger neighbor downstairs added, "He never had friends over. Just heard him typing all night. I thought he was just a gamer." Moore was loaded into a van, his face pale, eyes vacant. The image quickly hit morning news, spreading across Seattle. "Suspect in 2009 Helen White disappearance arrested," dominated headlines. For many, it was shocking. A name they'd forgotten was now central to one of the city's most enduring mysteries. Inside the apartment, police continued searching for hours. Moore's living space reflected his personality: solitary, cluttered, secretive. The fridge held only a few beers, the living room just a worn chair and computer desk. But that desk, with its old hard drive and black notebook, could hold the key to unraveling the crime. The lead investigator noted in the report, seized items likely provide further evidence of motive and criminal behavior. Recommend digital and behavioral analysis. As the van carrying Moore left Ballard, police lights flashed through the early morning fog, leaving behind a community still reeling. Residents gathered, discussing, trying to reconcile the quiet IT guy they saw at the market, or taking out trash with the suspect in a murder case that haunted the city for over a decade. For the investigative team, this wasn't just an arrest, it was a historic milestone for Seattle PD. The moment justice for Helen White began to take shape after 13 years of obscurity. The interrogation room at Seattle PD headquarters that morning was thick with the smell of stale coffee and tension. Daniel Moore, wrists still marked by cuffs, was brought to a metal chair before a cold table. Two cold case unit detectives, who had pursued Helen White's case for over a year, entered with a thick file. The wall-mounted camera blinked on, recording every move, every blink. Moore sat upright, face pale, but eyes trying to maintain calm. He insisted, "I never met Helen White. I don't know who you're talking about." The lead detective didn't react harshly, calmly placing a photo of the backpack on the table, then flipping through DNA report pages. His voice was steady. "The blood on the backpack, your DNA, no one else's. We also have DNA from your toothbrush. It's a perfect match." Moore glanced down briefly, but quickly countered, "Someone must have made a mistake. I never touched that thing." The interrogation pressed on with relentless tactics. The second detective laid out printouts from the old hard drive seized from Moore's apartment, his 2010 Google searches for Green Lake missing girl. Then he slid over articles about Helen, photos of candlelight vigils Moore had saved. The detective's voice sharpened. "You say you never met her, but you followed the case, saved every detail, read about it for years. Explain that." Moore pursed his lips, silent. 3 hours in, the strategy shifted. Police offered him water, softened their tone. "Daniel, you've carried this burden for 13 years. We know it wasn't what you planned. We know you're not a cold-blooded monster, but Helen deserves to be found. Her family deserves to bury her. Only you know the truth." Moore wavered, but still shook his head. By the 6th hour, the room grew heavier. An experienced detective used a good cop, bad cop approach. One slammed the table shouting, "You think you'll get away? DNA doesn't lie." The other sighed, sat down, and said gently, "Daniel, you're destroying yourself. Speaking up will be better for you." Moore began sweating, eyes darting, searching for an invisible escape. At the 8th hour, when a detective presented a photo of Helen's mother at the latest vigil, white-haired, clutching her daughter's framed picture by the lake, Moore visibly trembled. He buried his face in his hands, breathing heavily. Police stayed silent, letting him face his obsession. At the 10th hour, Moore finally broke. His voice choked, faltering in the quiet room. "All right, I did it. I didn't mean to. But things got out of hand. I buried her." Both detectives held their breath. The lead asked softly, "Where, Daniel?" A long pause, then Moore whispered, "In Snoqualmie Forest, near an old trail nobody uses. I dug a hole. I left her there." The confession shifted the room's atmosphere. One detective turned on a light, recording every word, asking Moore to repeat details. He admitted that on November 14, 2009, he encountered Helen on her way from Capitol Hill to Green Lake. He offered her a ride. She hesitated but agreed. An argument erupted. He lost control, shoved her, causing injury. Realizing things had gone too far, he panicked, drove her body to Snoqualmie, and buried it in a shallow grave. Moore couldn't recall every detail clearly, but it was enough for police to map a route. His account aligned with their long-held theory: Helen didn't vanish voluntarily, but was brutally killed, and her body hidden to remain a mystery forever. As Moore slumped back, exhausted, The detectives exchanged glances, their eyes a mix of anguish and relief. After 13 years, the truth had finally spilled from the perpetrator's mouth, and Helen White, the girl once reduced to a missing person flyer, now had hope of being returned to her family, thanks to the grueling 10-hour interrogation. The day after Daniel Moore's confession was fully recorded, Seattle PD immediately obtained a search warrant and dispatched a forensic team to Snoqualmie Forest, where he claimed to have buried Helen White. Early morning, vehicles cut through the thick Cascade Mountain fog, carrying detectives, forensic technicians, and a professional excavation team. The mood was heavy, as everyone understood this trip was not just about gathering evidence, but the final journey to bring Helen home after 14 years. Moore, handcuffed, was escorted along, flanked by police. He gave directions in a trembling voice, eyes vacant. The convoy stopped at an old narrow trail rarely used. It was a damp rocky path covered in fallen leaves. Moore signaled to stop at a small clearing where dense trees blocked the sunlight. He bowed his head, mumbling. "There, I dug the hole right there." The area was immediately cordoned with yellow tape, and forensic personnel in white hazmat suits stepped in. They carefully used small rakes, shovels, and soft brushes to clear the topsoil. Within minutes, a faint stench rose from the damp earth, making everyone catch their breath. A soft gasp sounded as an old, tattered green tarp emerged. It was mud-caked and decayed, but clearly unnatural. With cautious shovel strokes, the soil was cleared aside. Then, the shape of a body wrapped in the tarp gradually appeared. When the final layer of dirt was removed, the team stood still for a moment, the air silent except for wind whistling through the trees. Inside the tarp, a human skeleton emerged, surrounded by frayed ropes. Near the neck, a small silver necklace, intricately engraved with primroses, glinted faintly under the mud. A detective recognized it instantly, the necklace Helen's mother described as one her daughter always wore. The remains were sealed and placed on a specialized stretcher. Forensic technicians documented the scene, measuring the grave's location, orientation, and depth, only about half a meter too shallow to hide forever. Photos were taken continuously, capturing every detail as evidence. The tarp, ropes, and silver necklace, everything chillingly matched Moore's confession in the interrogation room. When the remains were brought to the King County Forensic Lab, examination began that night. Dental experts compared the teeth to dental records provided by Helen's family in 2009. The results were unmistakable. A slight misalignment in the upper jaw matched perfectly. Additionally, the silver necklace was positively identified by Helen's mother. The forensic report concluded, the remains found in Snoqualmie are confirmed as Helen White, missing since November 14, 2009. When this news reached the family, their small apartment was filled with choked sobs. After 14 years of waiting, Helen's mother could finally hold her daughter, not as the vibrant young woman she was, but as cold remains, yet at least found. For Seattle's community, the event was a shockwave. One of the city's most persistent missing person cases finally had closure, not by luck, but through investigators' perseverance and forensic science's breakthroughs. For the investigative team, the moment of unearthing the grave in Snoqualmie was not just ironclad evidence against Moore, but the closure of a relentless search. The most vivid proof, Helen White's body, had surfaced, ending all doubts and vague theories surrounding the case. A detective at the scene later admitted, "When I saw that silver necklace glinting in the mud, I knew this case was over." Helen was finally brought home. Immediately after Helen White's remains were found and identified, the case file was urgently sent to the King County Prosecutor's Office. This was a major turning point. A 14-year cold case now had the three critical elements for trial: physical evidence, the suspect's confession, and most crucially, the victim's body. The lead prosecutor held an emergency meeting with the investigative team, spreading the file across the table: the forensic DNA match report, audio and video of Moore's interrogation confession, the Snoqualmie excavation record with Helen's silver necklace. "This is a steel triangle," he said. "If presented tightly, the jury won't be able to deny it. However, the defense quickly mounted a counter-strategy. Moore's lawyer argued that the 10-hour interrogation confession could be deemed coerced, reducing its legal weight. They also contended that finding the body in Snoqualmie only proved Helen was dead, not that Moore was the killer, unless the prosecution could establish an undeniable link. Regarding the DNA, the defense planned to argue that the blood sample could have been contaminated or mishandled over a decade. These points were carefully crafted to sow doubt in the jury's minds. Aware of these challenges, the prosecution began strengthening every link. First, they called a leading Washington DNA forensic expert to testify, who would detail the blood sample's preservation from 2009 to now, proving no errors and validating the absolute match. Second, they contacted a forensic genealogy expert, a field new but proven effective in high-profile cases, to explain to the court how this technology narrowed Moore from hundreds of names, creating an irreplaceable investigative logic. Third, the prosecution prepared the Snoqualmie excavation technician as a witness to describe the scene in detail, from the tarp and ropes to the intact silver necklace on the neck bone, matching Moore's confession. Additionally, the prosecution planned to call Helen's mother to testify, not just for emotional impact, but to confirm the silver necklace as her daughter's distinctive possession, an unforgeable personal marker. Photos from annual vigils, where Helen always wore the necklace, would be presented as supporting evidence. In the weeks of preparation, the prosecutor's office met constantly with the investigative team, rehearsing arguments. They anticipated defense questions. Are you certain the DNA wasn't contaminated after 14 years, or did Daniel Moore sign the confession under exhaustion, unable to defend himself? Each was met with a firm response, backed by scientific evidence and authoritative witnesses. The atmosphere at Seattle PD was tense but filled with resolve. For the detectives, this was no longer just an investigation, but the final legal battle to honor Helen. One team member admitted, "We brought Helen out of that Snoqualmie grave. Now it's the prosecution's job to bring the truth out of the darkness in court." In early April 2023, with the trial date set, Helen White's case file was ready. The formal indictment charged Daniel Moore with first-degree murder and concealment of a body. Seattle began to watch closely, and Helen's family braced for the hardest days, sitting in court facing the man who took their young girl. But this time, they knew they weren't alone. Behind them stood a chain of airtight evidence, top experts, and a truth that had waited 14 years to be told. On April 12, 2023, the King County Courthouse became the focal point of national attention. From early morning, dozens of news vans lined the street outside, reporters jostled, and cameras panned relentlessly. The doors to Courtroom 3 opened, quickly filling to capacity, with no seats left. National media broadcast live, with headlines blaring, "Seattle 2009 cold case goes to trial after 14 years." In the public seating, Helen White's family sat silently, their eyes tense. Her mother clutched her daughter's framed photo, hands trembling but resolute. For the first time in 14 years, she heard the justice system officially confirm the truth. The remains found in Snoqualmie were Helen's. As the judge entered, the room stood. The atmosphere was solemn yet heavy, as if each person carried the weight of 14 years of waiting. Defendant Daniel Moore was brought in, wearing an orange jumpsuit, wrists still marked by cuffs. He sat, head bowed, avoiding everyone's gaze. Some in the room whispered, "He doesn't look like a killer," but for Helen's family, his mere presence was enough to make them shudder. The lead prosecutor stood, opening a thick file, his voice resounding. "Today we will hear the truth, buried for 14 years. Defendant Daniel Moore is charged with 2 counts, first-degree murder and concealment of a body. Evidence will show that on the night of November 14, 2009, he approached Helen White, inflicted fatal injuries, and took her body to Snoqualmie Forest to dispose of it." He paused, looking directly at the jury. "We will present indisputable DNA evidence, the defendant's own confession, and the recovered body with details perfectly matching his statements. This is no longer a missing person case. This is a confirmed murder." His words cut through the haze that had shrouded the case for years. In the public seats, Helen's mother broke into tears. Her brother buried his head in their father's shoulder. The suppressed pain of years crystallized into harsh reality. Helen was dead, and her killer sat before them. Moore's defense attorney stood, countering in their opening. "Your Honor, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, my client denies all charges. We contend the confession was coerced during a grueling 10-hour interrogation, not reflecting the truth. Furthermore, the DNA evidence may have been contaminated after 14 years of storage. Jurors, remember, in the law, reasonable doubt equals not guilty." The opposing arguments clashed in the courtroom. The prosecution painted Moore as a cold-blooded killer who hid his crime for 14 years. The defense tried to portray him as an ordinary man caught in an unfair investigation. The jury sat silently, taking notes, showing no emotion. Meanwhile, cameras outside continued broadcasting every moment to millions across America. The Seattle community, which had joined hundreds of searches for Helen years ago, now watched from screens as justice began to unfold. During the morning recess, Helen's family stepped into the hallway, surrounded by reporters. Her mother refused to speak at length, saying only through tears, "My daughter is finally called by her name, no longer missing but a victim." Her words rang like a farewell, closing 14 years of uncertainty and opening a new chapter. Helen White was officially recognized in the legal record, no longer forgotten, but the center of a shocking murder trial. In the following days at King County, the courtroom tension escalated. The media dubbed it the DNA battle, as much of the debate centered on modern forensic technology. The prosecutor began, clearly presenting the chain of evidence they believed sufficient to convict Daniel Moore. He displayed an image of the backpack found at Green Lake, zooming in on the dried blood on the zipper, then pointed to the scientific report. The male DNA extracted from this blood, compared to DNA from the defendant's trash, shows a perfect match. The chance of error is 1 in billions. Next, he showed photos of the Snoqualmie burial site, Helen's body, the silver necklace, the old tarp. The prosecutor emphasized, "The defendant himself led us to this location during interrogation. If not him, who could know where the body was hidden after 14 years? The defense attorney stood, sharply countering, "Your Honor, jury, remember that confessions can be distorted. My client endured 10 relentless hours of interrogation under extreme psychological pressure. Who among us can be certain what he said wasn't out of exhaustion and despair? As for the DNA, we don't deny the match's existence. But let me remind you, this sample came from an unclear bloodstain potentially contaminated over 14 years of storage. Forensic genealogy remains controversial. Many experts don't consider it absolute proof." The room buzzed with murmurs. Some nodded at the defense's reasoning, others looked at Helen's trembling family, yearning for justice. The prosecution didn't lose momentum. They called a new witness, a former colleague of Moore's from the IT company in 2010. The man took the stand, swearing to tell the truth. He recounted that Moore often mentioned Helen White's disappearance, showing an unusual obsession. He frequently pulled up old news about the case, printed articles, and read them during breaks. Once, when I jokingly asked why he cared so much, he just smirked and said, "Some secrets will never be known." I didn't think much of it then, but now, it gives me chills. The defense objected, arguing the testimony was speculative and didn't prove guilt. But the prosecution quickly closed. This is a familiar pattern among perpetrators. They're often obsessed with the crimes they commit, unable to resist mentioning them. During cross-examination, the prosecution called a DNA expert to testify. The scientist detailed the preservation process, how the lab ruled out contamination, and affirmed the match's reliability. He said, "In science, we don't use absolutely certain, but this match is 1 in billions. Practically, you can consider it undeniable evidence." The defense tried to pivot, emphasizing reasonable doubt. They cited past cases where forensic genealogy was questioned, but the prosecution countered, "The difference here is we don't just have genealogy. We have direct DNA from the defendant. We have a confession leading to the body. and we have corroborating evidence. This is a perfect triangle. DNA, confession, body. The debate raged for hours, each detail dissected under a microscope. One side worked to break every link by sowing doubt. The other steadfastly built a cohesive picture. Helen's family sat silently, sometimes crying when images of their daughter's remains were shown, sometimes trembling, fearing the truth might be buried again by legal wordplay. By day's end, the judge called a recess. But the debate's echoes lingered in everyone present. Some reporters commented outside the hallway. This isn't just a criminal case, it's a test of public faith in next-generation forensic technology. Meanwhile, Helen's family said simply, "We don't care about techniques. We know our daughter was killed, and we want justice for her." The next 2 days, the jury deliberated. Seattle was on edge. Each morning, reporters crowded the courthouse entrance, awaiting news. Live broadcasts showed the sealed jury room door. In that space, ordinary people bore the weight of deciding a suspected killer's fate and a family's 14-year wait. Leaked reports suggested heated debates. Some worried about the confession's legality. Others insisted the DNA was overwhelming. But ultimately, the pieces, from the blood-stained backpack, the buried necklace, to the confession-led directions, formed an undeniable picture. On the afternoon of the second day, the judge received word the jury had a verdict. The courtroom fell silent as the 12 jurors entered. The judge asked the foreperson to stand. Her voice rang clear. "We, the jury, after reviewing all evidence and testimony, find the defendant Daniel Moore guilty of first-degree murder and concealment of a body." A collapse seemed to echo in Moore's chest. He sat still, eyes wide but vacant. The judge continued. Sentence, life imprisonment without parole. At that moment, the public gallery erupted in sobs. Helen's mother broke down, crying tears of release. Her father held her brother tightly, lips trembling. "It's finally over, Helen." Many from the 2009 search community, present in court, couldn't hold back tears. A volunteer from those days whispered, "We promised we'd never forget." And today justice didn't forget Helen. Moore was escorted out, face ashen, utterly silent. His lawyer tried to grasp his hand, but he pulled away, as if knowing his life ahead held only prison days. Police cuffed him, let him out, and the door closed behind, leaving a heavy void. The judge took a final moment to address the victim's family. No verdict can bring Helen back, but today the truth has been affirmed, and justice has been served. His words left the courtroom in choked silence. Outside, the media immediately reported, "Seattle cold case, Moore sentenced to life without parole." National Evening News called it a victory for forensic science and proof of perseverance in investigation. For the White family, it was the end of 14 years of waiting. For Seattle, it was solace that justice, though delayed, could find its way back. The life without parole sentence for Daniel Moore closed a case that haunted Seattle for 14 years, but its impact didn't stop at the courthouse walls. The next day, major newspapers ran front-page stories. "Killer lived among us for 14 years." The community was stunned to learn more. A quiet IT technician had blended into the crowd, shopped at markets, used libraries, lived in the city's heart, while Helen's family and Seattle tirelessly searched for a missing victim. A former neighbor said on TV, "We never thought he could do it." It's terrifying to realize a killer can seem so ordinary. Those who joined hundreds of Green Lake searches fell into a quiet mix of anger and relief. Legal and forensic experts called it a landmark case for forensic genealogy's power. This technology traced a faint blood stain from a 2009 backpack to an Oregon family, narrowing to Moore. A judge, speaking at a post-trial seminar, said, "The Helen White case will be taught in law schools as a testament to the future of investigation." Experts also highlighted the importance of strategic interrogation. The confession leading to Snoqualmie not only confirmed the DNA, but provided direct evidence, Helen's body ending all doubts. Rather than wallowing in grief, Helen's family turned loss into action. They announced the Helen White Foundation at the University of Washington, where Helen was a freshman. The foundation focuses on two goals: supporting female students in forensic science and funding cold case research. Helen's mother, emotional at the launch, said, "My daughter couldn't graduate, but now hundreds of students will carry on the dream she left behind." The case sparked deeper community questions. How could a killer live unnoticed among us? How can society protect young people when a single mistake on the way home can steal their future? Seattle held public discussions on urban safety, increasing surveillance cameras, and building support programs for missing persons' families. Helen's Green Lake Vigils became annual events, both to honor her and remind the community of safety's fragility. National television commented, "Helen White's case shows justice can be delayed, but never vanishes. Sometimes, it takes 14 years, a family's patience, police persistence, and scientific progress to untie the knot. But when it happens, it not only brings justice to one family, but reignites faith for society." As Seattle's winter cloaked the city, candles were lit again by Green Lake. This time, they weren't for a missing person, but to honor Helen and affirm that justice, though delayed, found its way back. In the city's signature drizzle, a final message echoed on banners: "Justice may be delayed, but it never disappears." Helen White's story isn't just a horrific case solved after 14 years. It reflects broader challenges and lessons for life in America today. We see a University of Washington freshman who, after a late class and a walk through Capitol Hill in the drizzle, vanished forever. It reminds us that in a modern society with surveillance, cameras, and smartphones, personal safety remains fragile. The case also shows technology's power and limits. In 2009, police had male DNA on the backpack, but no CODIS match, leaving the case cold. Only when forensic genealogy advanced could they trace Daniel Moore. This proves the need to preserve evidence, as scientific progress can unlock justice later. But the greater lesson is that communities and families never gave up. The Green Lake Vigils sustained over years fueled police to revisit the file. In today's America, community engagement, neighborly bonds, and care for the vulnerable can make a difference. The Helen White Foundation's creation shows that from tragedy, value can emerge, supporting education, advancing research, and inspiring a new generation. The final lesson for individuals: be cautious when traveling alone, inform family or friends, and trust that justice, though late, can arrive. But we must work together to make it real. If you believe justice, though delayed, can find its way back, as in Helen White's case, hit subscribe to join us for more stories. Thank you for watching to the end. See you in the next video with another gripping journey to uncover the truth.